Hi, my name is Adam Chmurzynski. I'm a PhD student at the University of Arizona studying ecology and evolutionary biology. Today I'll be sharing with you research on range shifts in hundreds of thousands of plant species around the world and visualizing some of the consequences of that under various climate scenarios into the coming century. So imagine for a moment that we know a Category 5 hurricane is barreling towards some coastline somewhere in the world. We know this hurricane is going to do massive economic damage. We know that evacuations and emergency assistance are required. Now, imagine that we don't know where the hurricane is. We might not even know that it's a Category 5 hurricane. It could be worse. It could be a little softer. But we don't know where the greatest intensity and damage will occur, so we don't know where to focus our efforts. Now, this isn't a problem that we have in the real world. Intensive forecasting efforts allow us to predict storm tracks, track storms with very high resolutions, and forecast their location and intensity days or weeks into the future. So the problem I'm going to pose for you today is that this kind of effort is essentially non-existent for biodiversity data. For most species on Earth, we don't know where exactly they occur, and we certainly don't know where they will occur under changing conditions into the coming century. And for biodiversity, there is a storm of a kind approaching, and we need to better prepare for it. So I just want to introduce you briefly and in a cartoon sort of way to what it means to forecast a species range. And by a range, I just mean an envelope representing anywhere on the Earth that a species lives and occurs. And this is work that has been largely pioneered by Corey Murau here in the corner. He's a world expert on how to do forecasts for species ranges. We're going to be talking primarily about plant species today, but these methods are applicable really to any kind of organism you could be thinking about. So it starts with this grid of environmental data that we overlay on top of the whole planet. And this environmental data comes from many sources and represents what are called bioclimatic variables relevant to any given species that you might be interested in. For plants, it tends to be some combination of soil data, temperature, and precipitation. So here we have three species in green, blue, and yellow. And we build an envelope in climate space around each species representing their environmental preferences. And this represents their current range as we estimate it. And then we run those environmental preferences through a variety of climate scenarios to get forecasted range models where changes in the overall climate then give us changes in the predicted range for each species. So I've shown here that each species would experience some kind of a contraction, the green species experiencing a sort of a shift north. And these kinds of things would be typical of what we'll see when we start to look at particular species. So jumping right in, here is a map of Australia from a visualization that I developed, visualizing the present-day range of one species, Eucalyptus benthami. So this is a species that is native to Australia and endemic to the region of New South Wales, right around Sydney. So zooming in here, we can see that the range of this species is relatively restricted. It's endemic to this region, can't be found anywhere else. And it's a species of some emerging economic importance. It's grown on these plantations. And like most eucalyptus species, it has this characteristic pale white bark, shedded in strips like so. So what can we do with this kind of information? Well, knowing where a species is allows us to really quantify any of the threats that it might experience going forward into the future. Just as an example of that kind of threat, I want to share with you a set of fire intensity layers that have been calculated by a group of scientists at the University of Connecticut. And these basically aggregate the intensity and location of wildfires in the New South Wales region. So what you're seeing here is a summation of all the fires colored by their intensity, where red is more intense, from the period of 2000 to 2019. And mainly what I want to show here is that here we have a tool that lets us really process where and when these fires are overlapping with the range of a given species. And it gives managers some sense of which areas or species might be at risk. So having this data of species ranges is really fundamental when it comes to understanding what's going to happen to biodiversity into the future. So I want to zoom out here and introduce you to what this visualization is trying to accomplish. Having information on one range is powerful, but having information on all the ranges lets us make very strong statements about what's going to happen to biodiversity in general into the future. So these colors, red and blue, are mapping onto species richness for each grid cell on the planet. So species richness is just the count of how many species live in that particular area. And what this tool will allow folks to do is specify a particular area, in this case, Arizona, as you just saw, and quantify a metric like species richness for that area, and then do so into the future from the present day, which is what we're looking at now, into the coming century. In addition to allowing users to specify their own area, all of these green splotches that you're seeing on the map are a set of protected areas from a database utilized by the IUCN that lets managers and conservationists from anywhere in the world zoom in on their particular area and have some sense of what's going to happen not only to individual species, but also to the collection of species in their region of the world. As the tool continues to develop, we'll provide instant feedback in the form of the chart that you're seeing on the left and other charts like it that gives immediate quantitative feedback for metrics related to biodiversity as the user explores both their region or any other region on the globe. In addition, in real time, users can specify an arbitrary polygon to pull out the biodiversity data for that region and perform computations geospatially or apply statistics to subsets of ranges in order to make decisions and get insights about what's going to be happening. So in terms of insights, I wanted to again zoom out to the planetary scale and look at the species richness maps that I was just showing you. And then now to focus on the concept of forecasting to emphasize what will happen to this simple metric of species richness in different areas of the world across different climate scenarios, which are really key to the forecasting effort. So up in the top left, I'm showing you now we're looking at RCP 2.6, which is sort of the most optimistic forecast in terms of greenhouse gas emissions that force climate models into different states. So this is for 2050, and the changes between this scenario and then on into 2090 for RCP 2.6 versus the present day richness are pretty minor, which is sort of where we want to be. We won't see very large shifts in diversity driven by climate, at least. And so here we see RCP 8.5, which is the most pessimistic climate scenario that is on offer into 2050. And you can see areas of the world where diversity starts to collapse in comparison to the present day richness. And this is for 2090. And there you can see a precipitous shift in species richness, particularly in tropical areas that house the most biodiversity. So shifting back to the present day, in the Amazon basin, you can see that if we continue on to this most pessimistic climate scenario, we see something like a collapse of biodiversity in the Amazon basin, in tropical Central Africa, on into Southeast Asia and the tropical parts of Australia. Rather serious shifts in diversity. But the story is not going to be simple. So as we shift back to the present, we see that Europe and parts of Siberia and northern Russia appear to be losing diversity. And then in the most pessimistic cases, appear to be gaining diversity. And what that really is probably representing is range shifts from species that typically live at lower latitudes. It's not as if new species are being born. What we're seeing is that certain areas will increase in diversity as new novel species move in from older areas. So this work is still very much under development, and I want to acknowledge those who have shepherded it forward as we continue to make the tool more robust and include more of the data coming out from both NSF awards and these fantastic scientists, particularly Corey and Muro at the University of Connecticut, who provided most of the ranges that you saw here, and Shenyi Shen, also from University of Connecticut, who provided the fire data from Australia, and Brian Enquist at the University of Arizona, who provided academic advising for this work. So this visualization is very much under active development. We have big plans for sharing this extremely rich data set, and I hope you enjoyed some of the local and global insights. Thank you for listening.